Welcome back to the What If It Works podcast. I'm your host, Ann Vogt, and you are on episode 57 with us today. I am excited. We are wrapping up our trust series. And if this is the first episode you're listening to, you have not had the pleasure to meet Sara Gagnon, our relationship coach who is in the house for this series. Sara, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a coach in Wisconsin, in Wauwatosa at Empath Counseling. And I work with couples to clear up communication. And I also work with individuals that feel like there's a block in their life, and I help them clear that path. So if you want to get a hold of me and do some virtual coaching or one-on-one in person, you can just go to empathcounselingllc.com.
Awesome. And we have connected because we know that trust can be an issue at work, at home, and in your relationships. And so it's been really fun to go through this series with Sara. Back in episode 54, we talked all about, is it even a trust issue? Do you have a break in trust? And what does that look like? What does that feel like for you? In episode 55, we talked about what to do when you have been betrayed by someone. So what are the steps to take to kind of initiate a conversation so that you can be clear and honest and really grow forward with this individual? And then last episode, episode 56, was all about when we have been the one who broke the trust. What can you do to admit, to acknowledge that that happened? And how can you, again, take accountability for that action and move forward with the individual or the team in which you've broken the trust? And so now today, our last episode in this trust series, episode 57, is going to be all about what actions can we take after those meetings to very quickly, and maybe not quickly, but regain the trust that was broken, right? And we really want to do that so we can create a structure that is so strong so that you can really thrive at work or in your relationships with this individual. And so today we're going to give you a ton of ideas. So we've really been thinking about what are some ways, fast and slow or over time, that you can grow trust with this individual that you've felt that fracture in that trust with. Sound good? Sara, you ready to rock?
Ready. Let's go.
Let's do this. We thought we'd start with if you have broken trust with an individual. So whether they have been the betrayer or you have been the betrayer, how can you, after you have that meeting, you clear things up, you get on the same page. Now, what kind of actions can you take moving forward? So first and foremost, we want to remind you that if you said in that meeting, in the future, I will take these actions, you better be taking those actions. So step number one, or idea number one, is follow through on what you said you would follow through on. So if that was giving this individual space, give them space. If that was asking this person's opinion in the future, be sure you put that on your priority list. If you said you were going to check in with them every Friday, get that schedule on your calendar, get that meeting scheduled so that every Friday you are following through. I think that's the number one way for you to grow trust back, is to take the actions that you said you were going to take. And that's really how we're going to grow trust very quickly. That could be a quick way for you to grow trust back, is just to simply do what you said you would do. That's how you become a trustworthy person.
And
Thoughts?
if you are somebody like myself who may have had that happen and you know it's your turn to take the initiative to follow through, sometimes I have to set alarms for myself, or I write it on my calendar, like, text so-and-so, they want to hang out with you, and this is like really important to maintain the friendship or the relationship, whether at work or in your life. And I just have to admit that that's an okay thing to do. If you need little reminders to stay on track with a relationship that you're trying to mend, that's okay. It's a really easy thing to do, and it does help, and I've done it.
And such a good reminder that it's not that you're blatantly not taking these actions. You
Right.
are possibly going to go right back in to your rhythm with this individual. And so that trust can be severed again if we go back doing the same things that broke the trust before. And so having a little action that keeps you accountable, like a little post it note or a note in your phone, that's
Mm-hmm.
just a way for you to stay accountable for what you said you were going to do. I think that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Another thought that we had for an individual to grow trust back with them is really involve them in conversations and decisions. If
Yes.
trust was broken because you didn't involve them or you didn't communicate with them or you stepped on toes, a way
Mm-hmm.
to regain that trust is to get them involved in those conversations. And
Mm-hmm.
so not making a big deal out of this, right? I'm not going to go to Sara and say, okay, I remember last week I didn't listen to you. So tell me your ideas this week. We don't
Yeah.
want to draw attention to it. What we do want to do is say, hey, I was thinking about XYZ this week, and I was wondering if you have anything to add or other thoughts on
That would
this
be
topic.
so good.
Yes, we want to get them involved with you in a safe space and
Mm-hmm.
again, start to regrow that trust. Sara, have you ever had an opportunity like that where someone has come to you and
Yeah.
offered you a space to share your ideas?
Yes, I've actually had someone in an authoritative kind of position, a leadership position, where there was a fracture and an invitation was talked about in our one on one. And the invitation was to become a part of a leadership community that made some decisions about
Okay.
students and parents and some other people in the building. And I felt so excited and seen and heard. And
Mm,
I remember one of them was scheduled after our one on one, and I wasn't invited to that one. And I felt like nervous. I was like, oh no, they're not going to follow through. And it just wasn't the right leadership meeting for me to attend. I was, in fact,
okay.
invited the next time. So if anyone's listening, they're like, oh no. Yeah, sometimes it takes some time, right? We have to wait for the right opportunity because the very next opportunity that they might think your great voice needs to be heard or your ideas need to be heard, it might not be the very next meeting. So just be a little bit
Right.
patient. Patience is part of this. And it did feel
Yes.
so amazing to any managers out there. If you can get a voice that hasn't been invited into those manager leadership meetings, it feels amazing to feel. It just is a beautiful thing. And I will never forget that invitation.
Yes. That reminds me so much of the Disney Pixar situation where there was a time when after the cartoonists and the storyline people created their idea for a film that everyone was invited to watch it and give feedback, and people who weren't even on the film, people who clean the studio, people who answer the phones, everyone was invited to share their perspective, because
Mhm.
obviously Disney and Pixar, they make their movies for a lot of people. They don't just make them for, the animators themselves.
That's
And
right.
so getting a group consensus and vibe. And I remember a story being told about, oh goodness, of course I'm
Up.
going to forget the name,
It was up,
with the
right?
balloons. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. Up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, in the movie Up, originally that movie was not between an old man and a little kid. The whole
Okay.
idea was like two brothers that were going to go on this adventure, and the audience said it didn't hit with me.
Yeah.
I'm not in. And they gave ideas on how to make it better. And I just love that Sara suggested, getting more viewpoints in and allowing people who haven't been seen or heard to feel and be seen and heard in an opportunity that is a safe place, like a leadership meeting. Um, Talk about regrowing trust and really feeling like a part of the team when maybe that action that they took severed that.
Yep.
Really being invited and feeling
Mhm.
like, hey, this person not only wants my opinion but trusts my opinion to
Yeah.
bring me into this type of a situation.
And I really
So
appreciate
good.
the transparency that this person said, I know we had this meeting and I promised that I was going to invite you. It wasn't the right meeting for your voice, but this next one, We have a space for you. We need you. And I was like, okay, this is great. It felt
I
awesome.
suppose. Let me clear my calendar.
Yeah, let's do
Oh, I love it. I think too, one of the things we talked about in the last few sessions
it. Hmm.
were that you need to check back in with this individual. And
Yep.
so, just a reminder, another way to grow trust is give it some space
Hmm.
and verbally check back in. And so, Sarah, I'm going to default to you on this one. What does that look like? What does that sound like when it's two individuals and it's a month later? How would that check in? How would you make that feel like a really safe space to share the reality of how people are feeling a month later?
So for me, I think it's really important that whoever's the betrayer and coming back and trying to follow through, I think they need to make sure A, am I doing what I said? And B, are you still feeling like things are equal between us so that you're not feeling controlled or dominated in the situation? I think that's a really nice space for people to do that exchange. That would be really
Yeah.
important to me. Hmm.
Yes. And I think just allowing it to be a conversation. Hey, it
Hmm.
was about a month ago that sat in my office and I had shared with you that, I knew there was some trust broken and, I apologized and I just want to see how you're feeling. I've been taking some actions to really regrow trust. How are you feeling in the situation? And then, like Sarah suggested in the last one, you listen,
Yeah.
right? Like, if they say, I really don't think trust is back, I'm still
Right.
having a hard time,
Yeah.
pause, try
Hmm.
not to get defensive and really listen and soak up the situations that they feel that they are still not, maybe being heard or being seen at work. Be willing to be in that hard conversation and take that feedback so that you can continue to grow in
Hmm.
your relationship and continue to build that trust back. And I think Sarah said this already today, but some people I think are really quick to regain trust and others take a long time.
Yeah,
Would you
trust is
agree?
slow. We need to be patient with those check-ins. I would also just say be ready to adjust the plan. Like be
Mm,
flexible about whatever you decided for that first one-on-one. Emotions were probably a little bit high. Now time has passed. Things have either taken action or maybe they haven't, and you need to be I would go in with a really open mind and open heart so you can hold space for some new things to happen and maybe
mm,
things to grow in a different way that you weren't expecting. And that can be a really positive thing for both individuals. But just to stay committed while you're in that process and know that trust is slow, it's not a fast procedure.
yes, so good. Okay, those were our tips for regrowing trust and regaining trust between one individual and you. We want
Yes.
to move to group dynamics. So,
Okay.
in our last episode, we talked about maybe there's a leader who
Mhm.
broke trust with an entire team.
Yeah.
And they took the steps that we suggested, right, to have that open apology. But now we need to regrow trust with the whole team. Sarah,
Yeah.
help us out. What are some things we can do?
I think first, before you bring it to the team, I think it would be really beneficial for the leader or the person that broke the trust to go to that person that you had a one on one with and ask permission to announce it publicly. That also
Ooh,
puts them in a position of, I'm going to say power, but in a really gentle way. It allows them to have, be like, you know what? That doesn't really feel good. I don't really want my name involved in that. Is there any way we can address it without being publicly like, Sarah, you did this thing and now I want to. So I would go to the
yeah,
person and just check in and make sure, how do you feel about me bringing this out? Because I really want to own my mistake. And I think having that
yes,
conversation would be really powerful. And let's just say that they said, yes, go for it, use my name. I would, as a leader, go to my team and say, I know we usually start this way, but I want to reserve the first 5-10 minutes to open this up to this group. And then I would publicly address what had happened in a really gentle way. Again, something that the person would be comfortable with, and tell them that I made a mistake And how I went about it is I went to the person, I addressed it, we had a conversation, I've started to take some actions. And I just want to let you know that it worked really well for me. So if anyone else is having some friction in the team, this is usually what works best for me, and it's going really well. And I just want to open that up and let you know that does happen. And yeah, that's where we are in the solution, like in the process.
Oh,
Yeah.
so good. And I love your idea of going to the individual first and saying,
Yeah.
I would like to make an apology to the team about my action that you and I discussed last week. And
Yeah.
I'd love to say thank you to you for bringing this forward. Are you comfortable with that?
But yeah.
Talk about regrowing trust quickly. Like
Yeah.
that, like you said, you are going to put the other person, the person that you betrayed, in a
Yep.
position of power, or give them the opportunity to say, please don't use my name, or sure, that works. Like that is going to regrow trust with that individual. And then you going to the team saying, hey, I'm really grateful. Sara brought this forward and I recognized my mistake. I just want to apologize to the team for that happening. And I'd like to open up the floor or open up a discussion on how we can move forward out of this.
Yeah.
Or, like you said, here are some ideas that Sara and I discussed that I really liked, and I'm really excited to take action on those. I think that would be just a great way to build trust with the individual who came to you first,
That's right.
and then grow trust with the team to say, this is a safe space. We all make mistakes, including me as your manager. And I openly invite other people to give feedback so that we can continue our momentum as a team. I
And I
think
think
that would
that's
be
so
so
great that
powerful.
if he or she mention the process that they worked on, like leadership and the person underneath in the as part of the team, if that person can describe how that went, that one-on-one meeting, she sent me an email, I responded, we met, we both had this really lovely conversation. I think that description would be a really nice thing to have. And you could also ask the person, do you want to tell the story with me, or would you prefer to stay quiet? Because again, getting them into a leadership position next to you is also providing a stage for them to tell their point of view. So it's not always coming from like a manager or leadership. I think that would be kind of a cool
Yes.
thing to offer.
Absolutely. I hear so often, just today I was presenting and someone said, I really want a collaborative team. And I was like, great. And so we talked about what actions are you taking right now to
Yeah.
foster collaboration? And she said, well, I ask for their opinions on email. And I was like, great
Right?
start.
Good step. Yeah.
How often do you meet with them in person? And she said, well, we meet once a week and we call them team meetings. And I was like, great. Are you openly sharing at that team meeting? Thank you, Sara, for your ideas from the email. Let me share some of those. Are you opening up the floor for collaboration to occur right there in the
During there.
meeting?
Yes.
Yes. And she was just like, oh, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it, isn't it? And I was
Mm.
like, yes, girl, but you're on the right track. And she was. She really
Amen.
had,
That's a good idea.
and so many managers, their hearts
Mhm.
are in the right place. They want the right things for their team. And like we talked about in the last episode, sometimes priority of getting things done and getting things shipped out take a precedent. And we need to remember that if you really want to foster a relationship and trust between your team, sometimes that means slowing down and doing the things you know will grow that culture that you so desire.
I was just thinking about, we've talked about like a corporate world, and I'm just thinking about the relationships that I work with, the couples that I work with. This process also works for couples. You,
Yes.
I know that I have check ins in my relationship, and it is very challenging because there's usually one person who's like giddy and ready to hear all the things and give feedback, and there's someone who's maybe not so jazzed about it. And it's a hard thing to have, but if you foster a community type of feeling, even with two people, and you kind of set up the parameters like this is only going to be check-ins are light, and they're just like, how's our intimacy? How's our communication? How's your social life? How are we working as parents? Just mindful checking in like once a month as a couple
Yes.
is so beneficial, just to create that space without letting resentment build up, just like in the workplace. So I just wanted to mention this can also work. All the things we're talking about, being flexible, being patient, staying committed to the process, checking in, following through, can also be applied to relationships at home.
Yes. And to talk corporate, in my head right away I went, how many team meetings are focused on productivity and efficiency and not culture? Yet we
Yeah,
say we want to focus on culture. We want everybody to feel a part of a team.
that's so
And
true.
so that would be such a neat note for those of you out in the corporate world or company world. Are you asking or discussing how
Hmm.
things are going in your culture? Even say, hey, I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about what kind of culture we want to foster here. Here are some ideas I had on the top of my head. What are some other things you feel we're doing really well? And what are some things we need to work on? I think that type of a check in that Sara just described in a relationship can easily be done in a weekly team meeting or a monthly, company wide meeting to really keep it part of the conversation instead of waiting till a situation that breaks trust, right?
Yeah,
So almost be a
yeah,
little more proactive.
collective.
And that's
Yeah.
what I feel like I hear you doing with relationships is have those check-ins so you can stay proactive instead of reactive when it hits Sunday and you're mad stuff didn't get done or they didn't follow through. And like having those check-ins are going to allow that to be just a real even flow of information versus, well, we got to talk again because you
I
didn't
know.
do what you
And
said you were going to do.
I
Yeah.
realize that a lot of things that we've been talking about in this trust mini series, I've talked about a lot of systems, like try to have a check in at this point, and this is the apology, and do this step first before this step. This is might feel sterile or clinical at first, but we need a foundation. We need to start somewhere, and then you can grow into whatever your company wants it to sound like, or your relationship. You can make it, we always go out to dinner or we do something fun afterwards or whatever you want it to be, but we all need to start at the same spot, and sometimes it does feel a
Yeah.
little clinical or step by step, and
Yeah.
that's okay. Then you can put your own spin on it. I just want to remind everybody that systems are built for a reason, but then you can put your own jazz on it at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can be really confident when those systems come into play
Yeah.
because you know what to expect. You might not know what the other person is going to say, but you feel confident in having that meeting and being prepared and open to listening and actively engaging. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I do too.
I love it. And what if it works? What if you start taking these actions and regrow trust with individuals? I think what I just heard Sara say about having those structures is if you're on the receiving end of that structure and it feels really good, there's a likelihood that you're going to go use it in other relationships. There is
Yes.
a
Yeah.
likelihood when you get a new job, you're going to say, man, I loved how my last boss did this. So I'm going to do this. You're going to see a replication of
Mhm.
those behaviors because it made the person feel so good. And, when I was naming my business Impact Influence, I wanted it to be about how you influence people after they leave you. So
Mhm.
whether that's their next relationship, whether that's their relationship then with your children, whether
Mhm.
that's a relationship with their employees when they leave your company and go lead somewhere else, we want to influence them to be the best version of themselves that they can. And I
Mhm.
feel like that's what happens when we help people grow trust.
What if it works? The word that came to mind was innovation and space to be creative. When I feel that my company or my relationship has a system or a structure for the hard stuff, I have time to play in my head and build and grow and innovate. And I think, isn't that what we want in our companies and in our relationships? Like to be joyful and light and have energy. So we don't have to
So
worry
good.
about when things get funky because we've got something already set up. So I'm thinking, what if it works? We get to have our lives back a little bit. And that
For
feels
sure.
really worth it to me.
Yes. And I love that you get space and that
Mhm.
opportunity for creativity, which there is a ton of evidence on online of when people can step into their passion and their strengths, like how much productivity, efficiency, energy goes up just by being able to be in that space. And so I love that you brought that up, because trust is something we can actively take action on, right? We talk all the
Exactly.
time about what can you control and what can you not control. You
Hmm.
can absolutely control your own actions that will grow trust with other people.
That's
Now,
right.
as Sara alluded, it might take a little longer for some individuals to trust you. And we want to remind you that's because other individuals are coming with their own backpack, right? That have been filled with perspectives and experiences, good and bad. So we
Mm-hmm.
can't just immediately assume they're going to walk into your workplace and be ready to trust you 100%. But we can control how we are acting and how we are staying consistent in growing that trust so that they can, at some point, be prepared to trust you and step into their potential, which is
Absolutely.
exactly what we want for
Yes,
everyone.
girl.
Oh, this has been so incredible. I just want to thank you so much for your time, Sara. You have given us a whole month of episodes, and your knowledge and your ideas and your calm persona and structure. We need more of that in the workplace and in our relationships.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thanks.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure, and I loved working with you too.
Let's remind everyone, how can they work with you? Where do they need to go? Where can they find you, Sara?
Thanks, Anne. They can go to empathcounselingllc.com and go to the Inquire page, put down their information. You could even use the hashtag of what if it works from this podcast, and we will get in touch with you and we can work one-on-one in person if you're in Wisconsin or Wauwatosa. And if not, I can do a virtual or phone coaching session as well. So hope you reach out.
Awesome. And just a reminder, she made a disclaimer in the last session that if you want to do some couples coaching, sometimes the other individual isn't quite primed and ready for that. And so don't be afraid to reach out and have an individual session or two with Sara before you get your partner on board. The worst thing is staying stuck and not feeling momentum. And so we really encourage you to reach out and get started so you can start feeling that momentum, and that other person's going to feel it too. And hopefully they'll be prepared and ready to step into that as well.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And as always, you can find me at annvote.com. There is a Facebook page, Impact to Influence, where there is information about the podcasts and some of the speaking that I do and the culture coaching that I have for you. So you can check that out over there. And as always, if you need to reach me, hit me up on email. It is impact@annvote.com. We just want to thank you for listening today. We want to thank you for taking in all these ideas and then putting them into action. The last step in the impact method is transform. And what I always say is nothing's going to change unless you change. And
Mhm.
so transform your culture by taking some of these ideas and putting them into play, and just watch how your culture thrives. We're so grateful you're here. Keep going out there and creating change. Before we go, we want to congratulate our birthday giveaway winners. Congratulations to Heidi and Gretchen, who have the dynamite opportunity to work with Sara. And congratulations to Rochelle, who won the 4-session leadership coaching package. Thank you to everyone who shared interest. There will definitely be more giveaways to come.